Morning, everybody. Go ahead and get started on your journals. Make sure you turn off your microphone when you come in. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. Make sure your username is your name, please. Thank you. Peyton looks a little sleepy this morning. I forget who 434942 is, but make sure you change your name. Should match your actual name. Morning, everybody. We're starting in, oh, I'm sorry to hear that, Peyton. Hope she's okay. One more minute, folks. That's good, Peyton. Let's see. Yep. All right, so we've got a lot of things to talk about today. We get started right now. So hopefully most of your parents got the notification about the extra credit assignment. If you didn't, that's okay, because you have until the end of school tomorrow to turn it in. So I'm just letting Orlando, before we go any further, can you change your username, please? Thank you. Yeah, it's the debate thing. So let me go ahead and show you what it is right now. So it's right down here. It says extra credit assignment. We won't look at anyone's individual answers, but we're going to talk about politics today in a good, health, safe way. So the assignment is watch the vice presidential debate and answer the question below about it. Actually, it really should say questions because there's three. The first question is, who do you think was a better speaker? So this is like, you know, who sounded better, who was more controlled, who was more, you know, could string together some really good sounding lines. Number two is, what's one thing you learned from the debate? So hopefully, if you watched it, you heard some stuff that you hadn't heard before. There was lots of interesting topics that they talked about during the debate. Yeah, this is all opinion-based, Peyton. There's lots of interesting things they talked about: China, you know, the economy, the pandemic, all sorts of stuff. And then lastly, number three, who do you think won the debate and why? So this is basically just you get to decide who do you think was the winner, and ultimately, some people will just pick who, you know, their family votes for, or who they've been, you know, whatever, you know, who they like beforehand. But I was hoping that you guys would approach this from the perspective of just wanting to honestly watch a debate and say, you know, who do I think did better? Because let's say, you know, your family is Democrats or your family is Republicans, you can still, like, you know, say that, you know, the opposite side had a better showing at the debate. You know, it's okay to do that. It's actually good to do that, to try to see both sides and ask what you like. And so that's what I was trying to get you guys to do with the last question, is not only tell me who you think won, but why. So now if we go back to the classroom, you guys will see that there is actually the full presidential debate video that I posted. It's an hour and a half. I'm not asking you guys to watch the full presidential debate. That is super long, and I know it's exhausting and occasionally very boring, as they talk about things that, you know, are not TikTok and are not, you know, interesting to your world. But thank you, Brianna. That's nice. Yeah, Aaron, that's perfectly fine. So half an hour would be awesome. And I would suggest watching the first half an hour, because the first half an hour they're debating coronavirus and the pandemic, which is, you know, the biggest topic in the world right now. So that's probably the one area that, you know, you should spend the kind of time watching and trying to understand. And for the most part, what was interesting was that when they were talking about the pandemic, for the most part, Biden and Harris and Trump and Pence seem to be wanting to do pretty similar things, like their national strategy of like masks, vaccines, social distancing. It seems like they are, for the most part, on the same page. I think the biggest debate is whether, you know, schools and businesses should be closed. And so, you know, both of them have different views on that. Anyway, so watch that, answer those questions, and yeah, don't we all, Riley? Don't we all? Watch that and answer the questions, and just give me some interesting thoughts of yours, and you'll get some extra credit points for your grade. Okay? All right, let's go to the next thing. We are going to watch a brief excerpt from the debate right now, the highlights, for those who didn't get a chance to watch it. So if you'd like to write down some of your thoughts right now, I mean, I don't think you can answer, is it mandatory? No, Kennedy, extra credit is extra credit, which means it's not mandatory. It's basically free points, you know, if you want free points, you know, for doing something that's not terribly challenging. I mean, we could all use free points, right? So we're going to watch the highlights, and then we're going to talk about the job of the vice president. Okay, here we go.
They knew what was happening and they didn't tell you. Can you imagine if you knew on January 28th, as opposed to March 13th, what they knew, what you might have done to prepare?
Our nation's gone through a very challenging time this year. But I want the American people to know that from the very first day, President Donald Trump has put the health of America first.
One of you will make history on January 20th. You will be the vice president to the oldest president the United States has ever had. Vice President Pence, have you had a conversation or reached an agreement with President Trump about safeguards or procedures when it comes to the issue of presidential disability? And if not, do you think you should? You have 2 minutes without interruption.
Well, Susan, thank you, although I would like to go back.
I think we need to move on
Well,
to the
thank
issue
you,
of
but I would like to go
vice
back
presidency.
because the reality is that we're going to have a vaccine, Senator, in record time.
So let me tell you, first of all, the day I got the call from Joe Biden, it was actually a Zoom call, asking me to serve with him on this ticket was probably one of the most memorable days of my life. Public reporting that Russia had bounties on the heads of American soldiers, and Donald Trump had talked at least 6 times to Vladimir Putin and never brought up the subject. Joe Biden would never do that.
The
So far,
slanders against President Donald Trump regarding men and women of our armed forces are absurd. I can assure all of you, with sons and daughters serving in our military, President Donald Trump not only respects but reveres all of those who serve in our armed forces. I would tell you that don't assume that what you're seeing on your local news networks is synonymous with the American people. You know, I look at the relationship between Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the late justice who we just lost from the Supreme Court, and the late Justice Antonin Scalia. They were on polar opposites on the Supreme Court of the United States, one very liberal, one very conservative. But what's been learned since her passing was the two of them and their families were the very closest of friends.
Joe has a long-standing reputation of working across the aisle and working in a bipartisan way. And that's what he's going to do as president. Joe Biden has a history of lifting people up and fighting for their dignity.
To the men and women who serve in law enforcement, and I want everyone to know who puts on the uniform of law enforcement every day,
So that fly was a big deal last night. There was lots of people commenting on how long the fly sat on his head. For those who watched the debate, you probably noticed the fly. I think he was on there for more than a minute, which is impressive. I mean, I think that Mike Pence probably felt the fly. I mean, I don't know, if a fly lands on your head, you feel it, right? And it's not like he has a big old head of hair. Like, he probably felt it, but he was like, it's going to fly away. It's going to fly away. It's going to fly away. Just keep talking. Just keep talking. It's going to fly away. And it just didn't. It didn't fly away. So there was lots of words that were used throughout those highlights, but there's one word I want to latch onto, and I want you guys, don't look it up, but I want you guys to take a guess at what this word means. It's one of the most important words mentioned in the debate. Okay, let's transition from the flies. I want you guys to tell me what you think this word means. I know the fly is very interesting. Just think about it. Just try and break it down. Because there's 2 words right there. There'd be a person from Bipart. Yeah, okay. That's a good one. When you're out of taco sauce, so you have to use bread for tacos. Not quite. Not quite. Artisan. Oh, okay. Yeah, artisan is bi means party, so it'd be a person in 2 parties. Person who is with 2 parties. Okay. It's a person who is on both sides. Okay. Yeah, we're getting quite a bit closer to the answer here. China. No, it is not China. Type of participant. Yeah, so a lot of you are getting onto like the bi being two and like both sides. So what bipartisan actually means is it means to work with both sides. So our government is filled with Republicans and Democrats. And Republicans and Democrats have very different ideas about how government should be run. But our government only works if those two groups are able to work together. If they can't work together, then the government ends up doing not much at all. They get stuck. And so for a long time in our country's history, Republicans and Democrats, even though they disagreed, they worked together around the areas that they do agree, okay? And so what that's called is called bipartisanship or bipartisan. So basically it just means that you're willing to work with someone you disagree with in order to accomplish the greater good, okay? And so bipartisanship is something that has been around for a long time, but it's been lost in recent years. And you guys have probably seen it like on, you know, if you watch like cable news or something where there's just people going, you know, screaming at each other. And so politics has a choice. The choice is, do we highlight our differences or do we highlight our areas of common agreement? And in an election, it is important to highlight your differences because people are making a choice. But when you're actually trying to, you know, do government work, oftentimes the common areas where people connect are much more important, okay? So that's what bipartisan means. So you're probably, though, wondering what a vice president actually even does. And a vice president actually doesn't really do very much. Their main thing that they're concerned about is, well, what if the president dies? Who's going to take over? So that's the main reason that we have vice presidents, is in case something happens to the president, there'll be someone there standing by just in case. And we have very old presidents right now, or a very old president and a very old, you know, Democratic challenger. So Trump is going to be 74 if he's reelected when he takes office. Joe Biden will be 78 years old. So these are some old dudes. And so the chances of the vice president becoming the president are much higher than normal. When you had someone like Barack Obama, who was quite a bit younger, was in his 40s when he was elected president, there's less a concern about the vice president becoming president just because he's so much younger. So, but there are a few other things that vice presidents do. We're going to watch a brief video and you guys are going to answer a question about it. Yeah, you have to be 35 years old to run for president.
Here's what Franklin Roosevelt had to say about being president of the United States. Quote, "No man can occupy the office of president without realizing that he is president of all the people." Now, here's what Franklin Roosevelt's vice president had to say about his job. "Not worth a bucket of warm spit." It makes you wonder what a vice president actually does. The Constitution really doesn't say much about the VP and only wrote down 2 duties. The first says that basically if a Senate vote ends in a tie, then the VP is the tiebreaker. The second constitutionally mandated responsibility is to receive the electoral votes from the states in a presidential election and then announce the winner. The vice president wasn't even a required position until 1967 and the 25th Amendment. Before that, if the VP died, resigned, or ascended to the presidency, the position would just be empty until the next election. And that's just the way it ran. That's why the office has been vacant for almost 38 years total. But that doesn't mean you should disregard it entirely. The job is often a stepping stone for the presidency. 14 of our VPs have become president. But unlike the presidency, there are no actual term limits on vice presidents. So in theory, we could just find a good one and be done with it and just keep him forever, right? And the VP who compared his job to a bucket of warm spit, if you're wondering, it was none other than John Nance Garner.
So let's talk about the 2 main jobs so you guys can answer that question. The first one is, and actually a pretty important job. So if there is a 50-50 tie in the Senate, and the Senate has 100 people, so if there's a perfect 50-50 tie, the vice president gets to vote in the Senate. And then the second job is a lot more boring, which is that the vice president is the one that's supposed to count the electoral votes. doesn't really do that anymore, but that's one of the jobs that the Constitution gave the vice president. But the biggest job ultimately is to really just be there just in case the president can't do the job. John Wilkes Booth, assassinated Abraham Lincoln, and Andrew Johnson became the president of the United States. And so, there's been lots of vice presidents have stepped in the role. Like Richard Nixon was kicked out of office for doing some criminal activity. Well, he resigned, but he was basically kicked out of office for doing some criminal activity in the 1970s. So Gerald Ford became the president after he had to step down. So it does happen that vice presidents take over the job. It hasn't happened in a little while. But it could happen because, like we said, we have some old presidents. So there's a question on the classroom about the vice president's job. Why don't you go ahead and answer that? Make sure it's in 2 complete sentences. I'm only going to give you guys 3 minutes to do this because it's just 2 sentences. So go ahead and answer that, and we'll be back together at 9:35. The question's on the classroom, Riley. It says, what's the job of the vice president? It should be the top thing on the screen there. All right, so that was 3 minutes to answer that question. We're going to go ahead and talk about what we're going to do in the second half of class, and then I'm going to let you guys take your 2.5 minute break. So the second half of class will be revolving around 2 things. Number 1, I'm going to read chapter 12 of Chains to you, and we're going to look at the chains summaries that I've posted. And then after that, I'm going to give you guys the practice quiz for tomorrow's actual quiz. So pretty peaceful time after we get done with break. So it is about to be 9:36, so I'll see you guys back here at 9:38 and a half. Get up, move around, do something, take a break. All righty, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we're going to look at some things. I'm going to put a question into chat to make sure we're all still here. Would you rather So the question is, would you rather never have cold drinks ever again or always have cold food? Never have cold drinks. Oh, David wants those cold drinks. So why don't you, I'd rather always have cold food. Yeah, it's an interesting question. You know, because a lot of us really like ice in our food, right? Cold drinks because yeah, hot chocolate is good, but do you want hot chocolate in July? Cold food, because there are some foods. All right, Milani and Brianna, you got to spell more out than that, yes or no. That doesn't tell me much. Never have cold drinks. Yeah, the cold drinks, I don't know. I think I would rather, because just imagine that every food is cold. I mean, that just really limits what you can eat. Whereas a cold drink, I mean, lukewarm water is not like the worst thing in the world, right? It's just water. Yeah, I'm with Brianna. I like my food really hot and warm. Yep, hot pockets will turn into cold pockets. That is true and gross. True and gross. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we're going to talk about chains for a minute. So if you actually look in our class novel section under the chains chapter summaries, you'll see that I've now included all the way up until chapter 11 in our summary list here. So chapters 9, 10, 11 are now there. I've added those recently. We're going to read chapter 12, and I'm going to assign chapter 13 over the weekend for homework. You can either do it tomorrow during the asynchronous day or sometime over the weekend. Chapter 12 and chapter 13 are both short, which is the good news, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and read out loud to you guys. Let me go ahead and stop sharing my screen and see if I can share my book. All right, so, all right, chapter 12. So I'm gonna go ahead and read this chapter out loud to you guys. And then after this, we'll talk about tomorrow's quiz. So I am right down here where it says Becky. Becky sent me to fetch Lady Seymour to help Madam get through having her husband arrested like that. The old lady lived 2 blocks north of Trinity Church, the one with the spires that scrape the sky. It's one of them old Dutch-style houses, got a red door and a knocker that looks like a heart, Becky said. Can't miss it. The house was not far from City Hall, along a street where soldiers with heavy axes were chopping down the row of tall poplar trees. Fortifications, a soldier explained to a cartman, to protect against invasion. Any day now, they say. The red door made the house easy to find. I walked through the beautiful garden around to the back. Neatly trimmed boxwood hedges created a path lined with young betony plants, lavender daylilies, and honeysuckle. Mama would have admired the roses. My fingers itched to pluck the scraggly weeds that were crowding them, but I dared not. I knocked at the door. The door was opened by the whitest girl I'd ever seen. Her skin was pale as water, except for 2 flame-colored spots on her cheeks. Her eyebrows and eyelashes were near invisible, and her eyes were a mix of pewter and blue. She wiped her hands on her apron and said something I didn't understand. I've come for Lady Seymour, I explained. Madam Lockton requires her presence. What wilt you? She frowned. What did you say? In Augenblick. Alstublieft. she said before she closed the door in my face. What is an Augenblick? New York was stranger every passing day. I knocked again, but there was no answer. I was about to walk home when I heard Lady Seymour's voice through an open window. A moment later, the door opened and she stood there in the kitchen. I curtsied proper like, "Pardon, ma'am, but they've arrested master. Madam is poorly." She nodded. "They've been hunting loyalists all day. I told Anne it would come to this. Come inside, child. Isabel is not." The kitchen was larger than the Locktons, with a tiled hearth and copper pots hanging on the wall. A smoke-colored cat curled itself around my ankles, its tail in the shape of a question mark. "Please sit down. You must be hungry." I perched on the edge of a chair. Lady Seymour pulled me a mug of fresh milk. My surprise at having a proper lady do so much must have shown on my face. "You could use some building up," she said as she pushed a plate of molasses cookies to me. "Eat and tell me everything." She turned to her servant who stood by the hearth. "Will G, aus geblieft, even de Moobles, afstoffen?" The strange girl bobbed once and left the room, the pale pink ribbons from the back of her cap trailing behind her. "She speaks only Dutch," Lady Seymour explained, "and shows no inclination to learn English, I'm afraid. Now bite and the events." I chewed the cookie quickly, took a sip of milk, and recounted near everything, though I neglected to mention my role as the household spy. "Did Elihu say anything to the men who arrested him? Did he give them any names?" "Not in my hearing, ma'am." She sat back in her chair. "He's in no danger so long as he stays silent." She broke off a piece of cookie and popped it in her mouth and chewed. "I imagine Anne is in a lather." "Yes, ma'am," I said carefully. "She told Becky to pack the trunks for Charleston." Lady Seymour shook her head. "I don't blame her, but fleeing won't ensure the rebels won't take everything." "Yes, ma'am," I mumbled. I took an overly large bite of the cookie, certain she would send me back straight away. She tapped her forefinger on the table as she pondered, her rings flashing in the light. "Right," she said firmly, having come to a decision. "I will write a note for you to take to the lawyer's office before you go home, and another for Anne telling her that Elihu will soon be set free." The Dutch girl came back in the kitchen and said something I could not make out at all. Lady Seymour rose from her chair and motioned for me to stay seated. "Finish those cookies, please, and drink a second glass of milk. You can't run errands for me unless you're properly nourished." So you'll notice that Lady Seymour is a lot nicer than Madame Lockton is. I also saw that a lot of you were having some interesting chats while I was reading. I agree, Riley. Stop spamming the chat. So, Isabel's master, Mr. Lockton, has been arrested. His wife, Madame Lockton, who doesn't really like Isabel that much, is considering running away. And Isabel is working as a spy for the rebels, for George Washington's army. So that's where we are right now. I'm going to go ahead and post our practice quiz and talk about it, and then you guys will get to work on it for the last 10 minutes of class today. So the quiz this week is a little bit shorter than in previous weeks. I kind of decreased the size for you a bit, just to make things, a little bit more easier to manage. It is worth 70 points. So that is quite a bit, but that is the main thing that you guys will be doing tomorrow. So don't feel like, too intimidated or whatever, because you got all day and evening and afternoon to practice. So just make sure you take the quiz as many times as you can. That'll help you be successful. I've posted it under the 13 colonies. It says practice quiz 5. When you open it up, it has the normal last name, comma, first name, and period. Then it has some questions from our reading assignment from this week. And then it has some questions from our lecture from this week. Okay. So I'm going to give you guys 10 minutes to work on this, and we'll be back together here at 9:58 to talk about tomorrow's asynchronous day. Okay. So go ahead and start practicing and try to do it as many times as you can until you feel confident you can ace tomorrow's test. I don't want to turn off chat, but you guys do need to do some work. Let's get to it. All right, it's 9:58. Let's go ahead and talk about what tomorrow will look like. So tomorrow will look like, we cannot take it again? Yeah, you can take it again. It should be set up so you can take it again. Let me see. Yeah, it says you should be able to take it again. I don't know what's going on. So tomorrow will look like last week. You'll have the quiz to do tomorrow, and that'll basically be it for asynchronous day. So it should be a pretty quick day for you to just kind of get through my class pretty quickly so you can move on to your other classes, okay? So at this point, you guys are free to go, and you can stick around and talk to me. I'll be here for the next couple minutes. Have a good rest of your day. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Or no, I won't. I'll see you on Monday. See you on Monday. Bye, guys. Bye, Peyton. Anyone left here need to chat with me? I'm available to chat. You guys just chilling.